All right. I know everybody does have busy days to keep going on, so we will get started. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Dick. I'm a health and safety consultant with WSPS, and we're here today to discuss a safety connection on managing safety without a safety department. As you'll notice, the mics and cameras are muted and turned off at the moment, but you should have access to the chat. And in the chat, you can post your questions. We will have someone reviewing those as we go. I will spend some time towards the end of the session addressing those questions if they have not been addressed through the session. But I definitely urge everybody, if they do have something they would like touched on, go ahead and put it in the chat as we go, and we'll take a look at that towards the end. So before we begin in earnest, and before I give introductions and do a little bit about the outlay on Teams, just want to give everybody the opportunity to participate in a short demographic survey that we are doing. And if you would just be so kind as to click on that link on screen, it will pop open a new window, and it will ask you for a 6-digit number code. And that number is on screen as well, 229198. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to leave that open for a minute or two. Your Teams is not allowing to see the presentation. Okay, so I will. Carrie, can I ask you to do me a favor, please? Could I get you to close out of the room and then just come back into it? And chances are that may actually correct the problem. If anybody else is having issues seeing the presentation, there is something on screen now, so please let me know if you are not able to see that. So I'm just going to leave it for another minute here or so. So anybody just joining, if you wouldn't mind clicking on that link, it's going to give you a short demographic survey. This is completely optional. The function number that it asks for is down below. Again, this isn't entirely optional, but it does give us some information as far as how we can ensure our services are being directed where they need to go. Carrie, if you wouldn't mind, just a thumbs up or something in the chat. Are you able to see the presentation now? Nothing. Oh, wait, getting a thumbs up from one. Nothing from you, though, Carrie? Still no visual. Unfortunately, there's not much I will be able to do from this end on that. You've checked the updates. The only other thing that I can mention is if you are in a browser, you can try opening with the Teams app. And if you are in the Teams app, you can try opening it with the browser to hopefully get that. Hopefully, you will be able to get that up and going. If not, we will have this recording available for review. And we also have another recording from our February 24th session on the same topic available for review on our website. So audio is definitely recommended for this. Phone conference is available. Thank you, Janet, that you're in the app and you can see it. And yeah, unfortunately, we do have some issues from time to time with different versions. As I had mentioned earlier, your microphone and your camera are going to remain muted and off. Just so no one has to be concerned about their faces or anything being shown on the recordings. But as we mentioned, the chat is available. So if you have any questions, go ahead and put them into the chat. If you're unable to use the chat, please just issue a reaction along the top screen, and we will see if we can do some adjustments on that. So we have a couple of different features for engagements, and we appreciate your participation throughout the webinar. Within the meeting, you have the option to use reactions accessed in the menu bar. So they're instant and they will float across up the screen. For example, there's a thumbs up. We'll also be asking for a couple of different poll questions throughout the webinar, and these should pop up on screen or in the meeting chat. And when we do get them, it's going to look like on screen here. Just select your answer and then hit submit, and we will just be able to get a room's consensus on that. And then depending on your organization's security, however, you may not be able to interact with the poll questions. And if you determine that that is the case, just use the chat to participate in those poll questions, and we'll look at that as far as the modification for the results. And if you are unable to find the meeting chat across the top of your screen, you should see the icon for chat. And once you select that, it should pop open a sidebar window. There's also some additional accessibility features within Teams. To enable live captions, you can select more from the menu bar, language and speech, and then select the turn on live captions. And to enable the full screen video mode, you can select view from the menu bar, more options, and then full screen. Both of these features can be disabled by following the same instructions. If anybody else is having technical difficulties throughout the webinar, please send a message in the meeting chat or respond to the access email you received. Hopefully everybody else is able to see it. I do know we have a few participants not able to see the presentation. So hopefully we will be able to touch upon what you're looking for today verbally. And as we said, there will be records available later. So before we really begin, I just want to take a moment to introduce myself. Good morning, everybody. My name is Ryan Dick. I'm a health and safety consultant with Workplace Safety Prevention Services. I focus more on the agriculture side of things, and I am up in northeastern Ontario. So if anybody is in that neck of the woods and has any questions regarding farm safety or ag safety, definitely please reach out to us. Today we are here for a couple of different reasons. We're mainly here to learn, share, and discover what is of value to you, our customers, and our communities. We're going to use these spaces to connect virtually with industry peers, as well as facilitate a best practice exchange. And it's also pretty nice. I know a lot of us enjoy things in person, but the attendance from our personal workspaces is pretty nice, especially for those of us that live in rural Ontario, where there is quite a bit of traveling. So hopefully you will be able to get everything you're looking for out of today's session. So format for this morning is going to be, we'll do a quick little introduction, and we're going to focus more on the power. So 5 simple steps that we can use to help improve our health and safety. And then we will round out the day with a Q&A period or some period for questions if we have time, as well as giving you a bunch of resources and access to the resources that we have available. Throughout the course of our Safety Connection presentation today, we are going to be working with Daniel here. Daniel is one of the business owners, and he's just going to be used for some of the examples. But as a business owner, like many others in the room, Daniel wears many hats. Whether they be administration, where we're dealing with finances, claims and reporting, human resources, whether it be operations, and we're dealing with customer service, production stresses, or facilities and maintenance. Technology is great, but unfortunately, it also brings a whole lot of other stresses and challenges to the workplace, especially for small businesses. And overall, we all have sales and business development and quality assurance stress is always on our top of our minds. So this will be our first poll for the morning. And if you don't mind, you should see something pop up. How many hats do you wear? As a business owner or as a worker that you are, how many hats do you think you currently wear in a day? Hopefully someone can see the chat. Seeing a couple of responses pop in. Just going to leave that chat open for the poll open for another minute or so. Definitely seeing consistency across. We are wearing multiple hats. I know we have a relatively smaller room today, but as everybody is aware, we have to carry multiple roles at the same time. And we should see another poll here just to give us an indication as far as where our client base is coming from. What type of operation are you running today? Are you in a tender fruit or a greenhouse operation? Do you have open fields, or are you in another farming type operation? Really helps us to be able to ensure that we are accurately meeting the demands of our communities. Some tender fruit and some greenhouse. I myself am a open field. I farm about 150 acres on my home farm now. We did have livestock up until last year, but it looks like we have quite a few tender fruit and greenhouse within the room. That is excellent to hear, and hopefully if you have any other resources, we will be available for you. And then just kind of round out just a little bit about you time. How many employees does your operation have? Are we running just a small farming business, family farm with a few employees, or do we have an actual large scale operation where we're bringing in dozens of employees throughout the season? So 20 to 50 employees seems to be the majority in the room. Seeing some other chats up here: landscaping and farm drainage, cash cropping, with 10 employees. Thank you very much for sharing. But as you can see and tell from the responses we're getting here, farming operations are quite varied. We do have a very large window of what falls into that, and each of these windows does have unique challenges and requirements of their own, but they also all have commonalities, and those commonalities are what we're here today to discuss. So we are going to discuss how to apply what's known as the Internal Responsibility System, known as the IRS, and that is not the agency south of the border. That is all of us working together in the workplace to ensure that we can all go home safe and sound every night. And the 5 steps that we're going to be looking at to review the IRS is put on screen here in the acronym for POWER. We will review policies and procedures that are required. We will look at obligatory posting requirements that you do need in the workplaces. We'll talk a little bit about workplace hazards, how we identify and control those, what education we need via orientation and training for our supervisors and our employees, as well as the importance of record keeping and reporting. And I know sometimes that may not be on everybody's first and foremost thought processes, but we will discuss why it is so important and that we are required to be doing it. And as I mentioned, if you have questions during the course of this presentation, please go ahead and put them in the chat. We will review them at the end. But consider the Internal Responsibility System. It is the foundation for workplace health and safety in Ontario. And it covers the shared duties and responsibilities between employers, supervisors, and workers. And it forms what is called legislative teamwork. And on screen here, we have a good representation of a healthy and safe workplace that is supported by both the employer, supervisors, and workers. All 3 of these workplace parties work together to provide that solid foundation and base. If we remove any of those legs, the stool will not be nearly as effective. If anybody's ever tried to balance on a 1 or a 2-legged stool, it is just not as effective as using the 3-legged stool. So the first thing that we do need to take a look at as responsibilities in agriculture is some of the policies and procedures that we need to have prepared and posted. There are required policies and posters, and down at the bottom of the screen, you'll see, I should have mentioned this earlier, I'm sorry, you'll see icons like this on screen. Those are resource links that you can click on, and they will open a new window for you. That one is there is for the Health and Safety Excellence Program. But for policies and procedures, we need to have a health and safety policy procedure drafted. We also need to have procedures and policies regarding first aid, emergency preparedness, injury reporting and investigation, any hazard specific programs, specifically lockout, tagout, confined spaces, working at heights, things like that, as well as policies and procedures for contractors and contractor safety on site. At the bottom of the screen, there is a link here to what is referred to as our Health and Safety Excellence Program. It is a phenomenal program for small businesses that you can work with through WSIB and your safety provider, hopefully Workplace Safety Prevention Services, that gives you assistance and support in identifying and implementing new safety measures, as well as qualifying for rebates towards the end. But we will discuss that more towards the end of the session, and just wanted to make sure everyone was aware of what that was on screen here. So when we're talking about policies and procedures, it's very important that we understand that they need to be written programs. It is not just enough to have a good indication of what we want to happen in the facility. We need to have something written down that can be referenced. Oh, sorry, I'm just seeing I have a message here that the computer chat is not working, so just give me a quick second. I'm going to see if I can adjust that for everybody. And just bear with me 1 minute more, everyone. Okay, hopefully if anybody was having a problem with the chat, they should be able to utilize it here momentarily. So I just did cycle the chat there. So if you were having problems putting anything in, try again now, and hopefully you will be able to receive those. So as I was saying, written programs and policies are required simply because it's not enough just to have an indication. We need to have something that's referenced. They need to have some specific information within them. But both your workplace harassment and workplace violence policies need to prevent and protect against the hazard. They need to set out reporting and investigation information as well as information and training. They're also required to be reviewed by your health and safety representative or joint health and safety committee for those of you that do have large firms in the room today. Just wanted to make one note here that it seems very daunting what can be to develop a policy and procedure, but really it is a lot simpler than most of us think. And on screen there, we do have a link to our checklists as far as getting a checklist on what you need to ensure your workplace violence and policy contains. So if you want to work on that, there's a good link there. When we consider the POWER acronym and the 5 areas we want to review today, we next move on to the obligatory posting requirements. Now, many of you are aware that we do have minimum requirements that have to be posted in the workplace, but there are many others, and unfortunately, that are unaware that we do have requirements as far as posting access to information. On screen there, we do have a link to developing occupational health and safety policies and programs, as well as the posting requirements. Few other links here. Some of the things, the in case of injury or illness at work poster is required, as well as the health and safety at work prevention starts here. First aid requirements have to having the certificates posted of those that members that have first aid certifications, as well as the employment standards in Ontario. The workplace health and safety policy, the workplace harassment policy, and the workplace violence policy all need to be posted as well as a current version of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Links on screen will take you to those resources for those of you that are looking for them. Once we are beyond that, so we've now looked at what we have to have as far as required policies on a high level overview, as well as what we need to have posted in the workplace. And those postings, just to clarify on that, need to be put somewhere where the employees have access to them. So whether you have an employee break room, ideally you're going to have a joint health and safety or a safety board, and these are going to be posted there within access to everybody on the facility. So once we've got beyond that, we need to start looking at how we actually manage the safety within the facility on a day-to-day basis in regards to workplace hazards, more specifically, how we're identifying and controlling those workplace hazards. And we use a 4-step process called RACE for that. The first step is where we recognize and identify the hazards that can injure or harm. We assess and understand what the repercussions are going to be of those hazards and how we can keep them safe. We also want to put controls in place to protect our workers that are working at those issues. And then finally, we want to make sure we are doing some evaluations. It's not enough to just give yourself a pat in the back and walk away after we put a control in place. We do need to make sure that the controls we put in place are working the way we had planned them to work. So within Recognize, there's a couple of different options that you can do, but all hazards in the workplace generally fit into one of 6 different hazard categories through physical agents, biological, chemical, musculoskeletal disorders or MSDs, psychosocial, as well as safety. Uh, Jessica, you available there?
I am, Ryan.
I'm not getting an option for the animations on this slide.
Mm,
So just to give everybody some examples then, when we're talking about physical agents, we are talking noise, vibration, extreme weather. When we look at biological, we look at the lines, things along the lines of biological plants, poison ivy, wild parsnip. For those of you that have livestock, we also have things like zoonotic diseases to worry about. A big biological that everybody's kind of familiar with lately was COVID-19, is an example of a biological hazard in the workplace. Chemical hazards are a little more straightforward. We're looking at things like herbicides, insecticides, even oils, cleaners. MSDs, we're looking for those areas in the facility where we have repetitive movement, long duration, or awkward postures. These are things like lower back injuries, strains and sprains. We have psychosocial hazards, which are covered under the violence and harassment, as well as the violence and harassment policies are examples of psychosocial hazards. Screaming customers, interactions with clients in the workplace, um, verbal bullying. Then we look at safety hazards, which is what a lot of us typically see as forms of hazards. These are things along the lines of a broken rung on a ladder, the general cleanliness of the warehousing floors, conditions that affect slips, trips, and falls, cuts, being pulled into equipment or machinery, entanglement, cutting and shear points, all are examples of safety hazards that we have in the workplace. So just if you wouldn't mind, just take a moment to kind of reflect in your own workplaces where some of these hazard categories are going to exist and consider the controls that you do have in place for them. And when we're taking a look at a workplace hazard, recognizing it is one thing, understanding what the consequences are is another. And to do that, we use the assessment phase. And we're going to review the probability of the injury. So how likely is this activity or hazard going to be to cause an injury? And we review the severity. Can the hazard cause serious injury or illness? Or what's the worst that can happen? And when we're looking at things, we review, for example, if we're reviewing lifting seed bags on a repetitive basis, we review the probability of that. Is that hazard likely to cause injury? Well, from someone who has spent most of their lives moving seed bags, absolutely, I would say that they're definitely a hazard likely to cause injury. We generally have a lot of bags and they're done repetitively. Can the hazard cause a serious injury or illness? Absolutely. For those that are unaware of some of the consequences of MSDs, they are one of the highest reported lost time injuries in Ontario, and they can have some severe, long-lasting problems. So in this situation, we'd be looking at the yes of a probability to cause injury, and yes, the hazard of the injury can be very serious, which is going to give us what is referred to as a high-risk hazard. In comparison, we can review a safety issue of having your foot ran over with the dolly. Is it likely to cause an injury? Yes. But is it likely to cause a serious injury? No. And that on the chart gives us a low risk injury. So as you can see, when you take risk into consideration, probability and severity, if you have one yes and one no, we're looking at a medium risk, and you want to make sure you're dealing with that. If you answer yes to both of those questions, you have a high risk hazard in the facility and you need to be dealing with that urgently. Whereas in comparison, if we answer no to both questions, it's not that you're going to ignore that risk anymore. That risk still has to be addressed. It's just not as important to address that risk immediately as the other higher risk items. And we will show you examples of what you can use for resources on this. On screen here, there is a resource or a link to our control hierarchy. After we've assessed what a risk is, we've recognized our hazard in the workplace, we've assessed how risky that is, we now need to look at putting a control in place. And not all controls are created equally. On screen now is what we refer to as the hierarchy of controls, where we start with elimination, moving towards substitution, down to engineering controls, awareness controls, administrative controls, and then finally we look at PPE. So an example of elimination would be removing the chemical altogether that we were spraying. So if we do not spray insecticides anymore, we removed all insecticides from the facility, we no longer have hazards of insecticides. However, it's not always the case, so sometimes we need to review substitutions. So back to this example of the small bags of seed that are requiring a lot of manual labor and manual material handling, we can look at things like substituting those 25 kilogram bags for 1 ton tote boxes or pro boxes and use mechanical means such as a forklift to be moving them. We also have engineering controls we could look at for moving skids and bags. Providing a dolly is very useful when we have small number of bags to be moving. If it is going to be a larger volume, then the engineering controls such as the forklift for the mechanical handling would be quite useful. Awareness controls can be effective. We can put up safe lifting posters. We can also make sure we have trained all of our employees by creating lifting procedures and training the workers on that. And we can give PPE depending on what the hazard is. If we're looking at rolling over feet with a dolly at this point in time, about the only PPE we can be looking at for control is steel-toed boots. On screen though, as you see, the effectiveness goes from highest to lowest. One of the things that has the bottom three, awareness, administration, and personal protective equipment, what they all have in common is that those three controls need compliance. So our workers, our people have to acknowledge the poster is there and they have to follow their training and they have to wear their PPE. If we can eliminate a hazard, substitute the hazard, or have an engineered solution for that hazard, we now removed the requirement for human compliance to control those hazards, which gives it a much preferable result with a higher ranking. So it is, as I mentioned, once we put a control in place, we don't just pat ourselves on the back and walk away, gives ourselves this big smile. We need to make sure that what we have done is actually adequately controlling the hazard and it hasn't created any new hazards that we'd inadvertently thought about. On screen here, we're looking at a hazard assessment for Daniel's business. Remember, the beginning he's wearing many hats. So at the top link, you can click on the link to actually get this tool to download. And there's also a completion tutorial on screen as well. Go ahead and download these, modify them for your own business uses. Just don't turn around and try to sell them on us, please. But when we take a look at our evaluation, we need to take a look at to see what controls we put in place. So when we're talking about a task or activity of receiving supplies, for example, the small bag receiving bags, the hazard would be back strain or other MSD injuries from the repetitiveness in moving the totes. So it brings us over to our controls after we do the assessment. So we've assessed, yes, it's likely to have an injury. Yes, it's likely to cause severe injury. It's giving us a high injury or high risk rating. If we put controls in, give everybody a dolly to work with, put posters up on safe lifting procedures, train everybody on safe lifting procedures. Those are all different controls, but we still have to look at the evaluation. So in this case, the next step would be we actually have to go buy the actual dolly. It's not just enough to say we're going to bring a dolly in. We have to go out and buy that dolly. Well, on the bottom of this tool, you'll see the assessment on the risks like we were talking about earlier, gives you how to rate those. It reminds you what the hierarchy controls are, and it also reminds what those 6 hazard categories are at the bottom. And a complete inventory Well, this was supposed to be a poll, but I think we've got a couple of things on here. For those of you that may have not been paying as much attention here, what do you think? Is a complete inventory of all tasks in the hazard assessment tool evidence of due diligence? Yes or no? Absolutely. Seen a couple of true answers come through here, and absolutely. Having that complete inventory of all the tasks on your hazard assessment tool is a perfect example of due diligence. You have now done everything reasonable to take a look to see what hazards you have so you can make sure you do have proper controls in place for the safety of all workers. So when we're talking back to the POWER acronym, we've looked at the posting, or we've looked at the policies, the obligatory posting, we've looked at the workplace hazards, as well as the evaluation phase. In that evaluation phase, you're going to go back and take a look at the controls you put in place and make sure they are working. If we want to provide a dolly for our workers so they are not carrying those bags back and forth across the warehouse floor, it's important that the dolly is effective. If I am 6'2" and I am handed a dolly that has a 2.5, 3-foot handle, chances are I may not use that as much as I would use a larger option. Whereas conversely, if I am very small and I'm given a very large pallet jack to be utilizing, I may be less likely to use that properly as well. So keep in mind, we need to make sure that the right equipment is there for the job. And we also need to make sure that we've educated via orientation and training all workers. So workers, managers and supervisors, safety leads, all need to have orientation and training, and they all need to have specific training for their certain tasks. Workers, for example, must have training on a hazard awareness. They need to know what hazards are in the workplace and how to control those. They need to receive proper job orientation, as well as job specific and safety checks. And how do we ensure, as an employer, how do we ensure that we are getting those required things? We can look at the resources that we have on hand. We have mandatory awareness for both supervisors and workers, depending on the steps, and the links are available on screen for that. We can look at things like the orientation handbook generator, and our small business center has an excellent small handbook generator available where you can select different hazards in the workplace. You also need to make sure that we are making sure our employees know their jobs, the hazards, and how to control those. And we can utilize things like events such as today's Safety Connection to increase that training. But once, it's not just enough to say we've got the training, it's not just enough to go and do the training. We need to be able to have records and proof that that training, that orientation has been taken care of. So consider your current practices. How satisfied are you with the record keeping? Is everything recorded properly, done in triplicate, put in the filing cabinet all the time? Or are we kind of surprised that, wait a second, I got to report and record on things? Seeing some answers come through. So some are satisfied, some not satisfied. Hopefully for both of those categories, there are areas of improvement that you can identify. But for those of you that are not satisfied or not aware, record keeping is very important. We are required to have that in the course of our workplaces for various different reasons, one of which is just to ensure compliance on that. So some examples here of some record keeping and reporting that is required to be done. We need to have records of any incidents, any first aid reports. Anytime we have a critical injury on site, we need to make sure that is being reported. And a critical injury is any injury that's going to place a life in jeopardy, produce unconsciousness, result in a substantial loss of blood, the fracture of a leg or arm, but not a singular finger or toe. Involves the amputation of a leg, arm, hand, foot, but not a finger or toe. It consists of burns to a major portion of the body, or it causes this loss of sight in an eye. If you have an incident that any of these things happen, and you are required to report that to the Ministry of Labor, Immigration, Training, and Skills Development immediately. It's also very important that you have access and know the difference and the timing requirements for WSIB forms 6, 7, and 8. We need to ensure that we are keeping all those training records. So the records of the worker awareness training, WHMIS training, job specific training, we want to have those records signed off on and easily accessible. We want hazard related records. So if we have confined space areas, we want to make sure that we're doing inventories on those. We want to make sure we have things like our forklift pre-trip inspections and circle checks, any loader inspections and delivery vehicles, want to have those daily inspections signed off on and kept for posterity. WHMIS training specifically needs to be looked at. We also have requirements for joint health and safety committees. They have records to keep as well and are well familiar with the requirements on those. And as an employer, it's very important that we do our due diligence. Make a list of what records are required for your business and make sure you've got those records on hand and that they are being updated on a regular basis as needed. Which sounds really easy in concept, but we all know, especially the number of hats that we're wearing, we can't be everywhere at once. And at some point in time, we do need to do things like delegate. But it's very important that when we are delegating to a competent supervisor. And competent supervisor in the eyes of the workplace health and safety is competent because they have knowledge, training, and experience in doing the job and the tasks that are required. They are familiar with health and safety laws and regulations, as well as familiar with all hazards in the workplace, both those that are existing and those potential to exist in the workplace. And if your supervisors are not being able to check all these boxes, it's very important that we look at ways to correct that. And a supervisor is anybody that has charge of the workplace or authority over a worker. So very important that we build up that competency, send them for training. Make sure that everybody who is a supervisor is aware of their obligations and the regulations that they have to follow. So hopefully if there's any questions, you're going to put those into the chat. But real quick so far, we have looked at how we can enforce power in our workplaces by having policies and procedures drafted and posted, have those posting requirements up to date, know our workplace hazards, putting identifications and controls in place for those hazards, as well as ensuring that we are doing updated and concurrent education via orientation and training of all employees, and that we're keeping those records and reporting things as necessary to the appropriate departments. And in an ideal world, we would all have time at the end of every day to be able to sit down and go over everything that we would like to do. But in the reality of things is we generally have more tasks and duties than we do have time. But it's very important that we try to stay on top of safety changes. One of the best ways that you can do this is to partner and work with your Joint Health and Safety Committee and Health and Safety Representative. They are excellent resources for you as an employer to rely on. You can do things like sign up for our newsletters. There's a link on screen at the bottom. Excellent resource to get any new updates on new regulations, upcoming information, and events. You can connect with system partners like us, WSPS, or unions for additional resources. You can take a look to see what other duties you have that you have to maintain care over, and that you want to be able to make sure you are staying compliant at all times. So what constitutes compliance on this is making sure that you've done that due diligence. I'd like to open the floor up for some questions at this point in time. Any questions on anything that we've touched on you want some additional clarifications on? It's been a very high level view so far. Not seeing anything in the chats, but if you do have any other questions, go ahead and put them in. Very important to remember though, you're not the only one doing this. You are not alone out there. There are all kinds of Ontario system partners, Workplace Safety Prevention Services, us as being one of those. There are also system partners like Public Services Health and Safety Association, Workplace Safety North, the Infrastructure Health and Safety Association. We have things like the Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario workers, as well as the Workers Health and Safety Centre. Ministry of Labour, Immigration, Training and Skills Development also has all kinds of resources available on their websites, and WSIB as well provides resources as well as a source of answers and questions. If you're running a small business, I highly recommend take a look at some of these links that are available. We have on the left side of the screen here, there's Safety Bites. So these are a bunch of interactive and small videos for your small business. So great way to get a little bit of information without having to really spend a dedicated amount of time for things. When you do have a little bit more of dedicated time, you can join up and review things like our Small Biz Safety podcasts. You can subscribe and listen to those multiple different platforms. We have our resource centers, and these are phenomenal for both small business owners and agriculture business owners. So this is the small business center. We will show you the ag resource center as well, but there's all kinds of resources here. We have the safety roadmaps, which is an excellent place to start to make sure you are compliant. It kind of breaks things down to the size of your organization and walks you through. We have all kinds of links here as far as understanding the health and safety, so additional support that you need. We have a section on what's new that highlights any big changes that have happened, as well as that Small Biz Safety podcast, which, as we said, is an excellent way to kind of keep up to date with things that are going. In addition to our small business resource center, we also have a dedicated agriculture and horticulture safety center. This is an excellent place regardless of what type of operation you are running, whether that be a family farm, whether it be a greenhouse, row cropping, or a landscape operation. There are resources here for all of you. We also have resources in multiple different languages for those specifically that are having to look for temporary foreign workers or bringing in additional help. We have a lot of resources in Spanish and other languages that are available there. One of the greatest things that I like about on the page here is also the link here to our farm safety roundup. So we work with Real Live Ag, and we do quite a few sessions throughout that. You can review our previous records or previous recordings there. There's also a link at the bottom of this page to the WSPS Safety Orientation Handbook. And for those of you, especially the smaller businesses that are wondering how we can go ahead and create those policies, procedures, and ensure we have those training things for our employees, that Safety Orientation Handbook generator is exceptionally useful for that. You can click on those links. You don't have to register with us. Ideally, you will, though. You're able to select the hazards that are in your facility. And if you have registered, you can save your current copy and then come back and modify it as you adjust and grow at the workplace. Some of the examples of our Spanish resources that are available on the Horticulture and Agriculture Safety Center. And one of the nicer things about this is also the headings are also available in those languages. So as far as having the users themselves go through, it is very handy. It's not necessarily something we have to sit there and find for them. I'd like to remind everybody that we are here to help. We have thousands of free resources and more on our website at WSPS.ca. We have services such as complimentary consulting. We can do CAT and material handling assessments. We do training and certification courses, whether that be joint health and safety certification training, supervisor responsibility and due diligence, or pedestrian management. We have all kinds of options available. And then we also have the WSIB Health and Safety Excellence Program. And this is something that I personally very much like and promote. It is an excellent resource for a small business center to get the help they need to increase the health and safety levels on the facility, as well as providing incentive through the form of WSIB rebates back for every topic that you're able to implement through that program. We have links on our website to those as well, and you can review that on the WSIB website as well. Ran through things a little fast. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to do? And I urge anybody, if you have a question, please go ahead and ask it. Chances are you will not be the only one with that question. You may just be the only one willing to ask it. You're welcome. Thank you very much. Leave it open for another minute or so for any questions. Thank you, everybody, for your attendance. If there are no further questions, I think that will conclude our rather shorter safety connection today on managing health and safety without a safety department. I'd like to thank everybody for their participation, and please ensure you are keeping up to date with the upcoming safety connections that we have available and signing up for those ones that do benefit your organizations. Thank you, everybody. Have yourself a great day.